Hi, I'm going to do a reading today of Princess Grace Kelly, the famous movie star who later married and became a princess in Europe. I'm sure you all know about her. And I'm going to start the first impressions I have of her chart before I go into great detail, what I see when I first look at her chart. Firstly, she has an early degree of Scorpio rising with Venus in Libra conjoined that. I would give her a Libra rising, actually. Then she would have Venus, a planet of great beauty, in the sign of beauty on her rising sign. And she has 3 Scorpio planets in the first, including her Sun, all in a great aspect of a grand trine to Pluto in Cancer and the 9th, and Moon in Pisces in the 5th. What does this mean? It means she makes an incredible strong impact. The first house is a house of the impression you make on other people. This would be even before she became a movie star. Her personality, her character, her charm, much more than her well-known family or her social status. Her herself as a person made an incredible impact. You could never take that away from her. It was much more than just her looks. She really had a lot of personality and character as well. So now you have very fortunate aspects to these first house planets of personality projection as well. And you have a grand trine, which is another aspect of good fortune. And you have a trine. A triangle is a good aspect between the sun in the first house and the moon in the 5th house of show business, movies, and children. So you have a really, really immensely, amazingly charismatic person. She wouldn't even need to go into movies for people to know that she really had something very special about her. There are contradictions and ambivalence in her chart. She was a very sensitive person with the 3 planets in Scorpio in the first house, Pluto in Cancer, and the Moon in Pisces. This means she's a very empathetic, compassionate, sympathetic, and a kind-hearted person. And yet, on the other hand, she has good aspects for being very athletic, very assertive, very aggressive. This might not be shown to her friends and co-workers right away. She is someone who would always get what she wants, not because she's manipulative or conniving, but because she has immense physical and psychological energy, and she is very direct. This would be the Sun in aspect to Mars and Scorpio in the first house, the Sun trine Pluto in the 9th. Now, Sun conjoin Mars. These are planets for energy and aggression. And in her chart, they're all well aspected. So this is what would make someone have a killer drive to the top. Not killer in an unpleasant way, because, as I said, she's open about her drive. She could actually have been an athlete, a professional athlete, and I think she was good at sports when she was younger. So she just has an immense, can't-be-stopped energy, and she was modest. She went to New York City at a young age. She lived in a sort of upscale boarding house for young women, where just women lived. And she had all these adventures in modeling, and she'd take all sorts of parts in advertisements and television shows that were just maybe not good television shows, just because she was also very hardworking. So she was a hardworking young girl, and she was modest, and she was very ambitious, and she was very aggressive. And I think maybe she was a little competitive too, because she ended up besting all the other Hollywood stars and her siblings by marrying a prince in Europe. So she really had a unique, charismatic life. And I sort of missed her in the movies. I think personally that it would have been great if she stayed around Hollywood too and made more movies, because everyone really liked her as a star so much. This is also someone who's a workaholic on their own account. So I think after she married her prince, she would have had quite busy days with her energy level. And very sadly, I think that she died so young in an accident, because I think she could have lived to be very old with these aspects in her chart. So that's a rundown. Okay, so now I'm going to continue the reading and going more into specific history of Grace. She was born to everything good. She was born to a wealthy and a stable family in Philadelphia. This is shown by her sun, trine, moon. Her father and mother were always together. There was no divorce. Her father aspect is extremely strong. Her father had risen from nothing. He'd been a bricklayer, very poor. He then owned one of Philadelphia's wealthiest companies for bricklaying, a brick expert. And he was also an Olympic athlete. So he really was a very powerful figure in her childhood. He won 3 Olympic gold medals. And because they had come from a bricklaying past, they were a little looked down on by the high society families there. And he experienced some bias when he went to the UK to compete in sports as well. He was known as the ladies' man who would buy gifts for his girlfriends in batches. And yet, I think she wasn't squashed by her father. She rebelled when she wanted to go into modeling and then movie acting. The father considered movie actors, quote, a slim cut above being a streetwalker, quote. So she had a lot of energy to defy him and still be a really contributing citizen. Peggy, her sister, was the favorite child of both her parents. She ended up with a serious drinking problem later. And generally the influence of her father and mother are very strong. Grace began acting as early as the age of 10. She was in a local theatrical play. Her father didn't want her to go into acting, but she went to New York City after being rejected by her first choice of university, Bennington. She was weak in math. She supported herself with modeling, and she went to acting school. She did commercials, she did TV, and she lived at the Barbizon Hotel for Women. She was a hard worker, as I've already said. She looked like a student. In her early photos, she had glasses, her hair was pulled back. She looked like just a seriously ambitious young person. And ironically, her first Broadway play was called The Father by Strindberg. Life is sometimes ironic. And her first Hollywood part was in a production called 14 Hours. Her second Hollywood part, she lucked out. She got into a very famous movie, High Noon. It was a Western with Gary Cooper. And then she went on to make 11 classic movies in 5 years, an incredibly good record. 3 she made for Hitchcock, Rear Window, To Catch a Thief, Dial M for Murder, and the Oscar-winning Country Girl. She was a fine actress. She was modest about her own talents. She was known for her sex life and had notorious rumors about her. I think a lot of it is true. Many of them were older married men. It was kept secret at the time. It was so large a problem for the studios they couldn't keep it secret too much. This later shocked some of her fans. I don't see her as promiscuous or kinky in her chart. I just see an incredibly strong physical energy. I think she would need to make love every day. She was a magnet for men. Her energy levels would have been difficult for her to control. And she combined with her beauty and the social circle she was moving in, she did suffer from gossip, I'm sure. She was called a nymphomaniac. She was called promiscuous, although men aren't usually called names like that. Hedda Hopper called her a nympho. Warren Beatty is never called by names like that. He's just called a playboy. She liked dancing in her underwear down the halls of her woman's hotel, which attracted gossip there. She'd get up from a boyfriend's bed. She'd rush off to mass, come back an hour later, and continue making love. So I would just call this a strong love of life. She does have a father obsession, which led her into her many affairs with married men. That is a flaw. Of course, no one is perfect of the people we admire. They included Bing Crosby, Ray Milland, David Niven, William Holden, and Gary Cooper. Zsa Gabor said of her, she had more boyfriends in a month than I had in a lifetime. As an astrologer, I should note here, I rarely see such physical energy levels. I've said that before. But she did seem to be in the ascendant in her relationships. She didn't seem to sit around crying too much. So she would usually leave these men, I think. They were older married men. And Pluto rules her first house. It's in the ninth house. And Moon in Pisces in her fifth house, that would signify the men would be a softer influence even than Grace, as they were often 20 years older or more. And later on, she had younger friends. Her marriage rules, the seventh house is ruled by Venus in Taurus. It conjoins her rising sign. And it's actually weaker, in spite of that aspect, than her own aspects for herself. She was not exactly the stronger one in her marriage in terms of the limitations she suffered, but she was far more famous than the prince, I would say. And her fifth house, too, is very powerful. So let's look at some other aspects here. Her three children would have helped her to compensate a lot for the sadnesses in her marriage. So I would say her father and mother, the sun and moon, and her children were by far stronger even than her marriage, which is, again, ironic because she was so famous for that marriage. Now, controversial stories also say that her husband first had affairs and causing her later to have romances of her own. The marriage did begin in sort of a cold business deal. $2 million in a dowry were paid to Monaco. Half came from her father and half came for herself. And yet they had a big fairy tale wedding on the surface of things. She was disappointed early on in this marriage. And let's look at a few flaws. Her weaker Jupiter and Uranus make her quite conventional and conservative. Jupiter rules gambling, ironically, as we are in Monaco here for her marriage. And Uranus rules originality. These two qualities were very pale in her chart, Jupiter and Uranus. She could have returned to movies later on. Hitchcock wanted her for Marnie. She debated this for a while. The fear of offending royal protocol stopped her. She was valuable to her husband and Monaco as they were to her. She couldn't gamble with that, though. She did not want to take chances on losing her children at all. So here we don't have much of a gambling, daring, or adventuresome side to her, apart from her incredible sex life that she had when she was younger. In her later years, she lived 9 years in an apartment, as well as in Monaco, seeing younger friends in the arts, and possibly one boyfriend as well. Her Mercury, too, for her mind is, I'd say she's above average in intelligence, but I don't really notice that right away, as I did with the chart of Jackie Onassis. I dreamed of her death a week before she died, a face of grace with tears soaking through the skin, like a religious picture. And I heard a voice saying Princess Grace is in danger. Then on September 13th, 1982, her car drove off a cliff. She was fatally injured. The world was very saddened by this. James Stewart said this best at her memorial in Hollywood. I just love Grace Kelly, not because she was a princess, not because she was an actress, not because she was my friend, but because she was just about the nicest lady I ever met. Grace brought into my life as she brought into yours, a soft, warm light every time I saw her. God bless you, Princess Grace. And I would say, looking at this chart, she really was a remarkable person. If you believe in destiny and fate, she was really born into that life to have almost everything, and she left it just a little bit too soon. So the loss, therefore, would be with her children and her family. And okay, so I'll just put links to other Princess Grace sites as well here. This is my first reading in my series on famous women, and I tried to balance it with a few flaws, but I like mostly to do people that I like and find interesting. Okay, so thank you, and watch my next films. Bye-bye.